So thanks everyone for joining the Healthcare Innovation Workshop today. Appreciate your time. We've got an hour and a half here, and so I think we have a lot of interesting content to share. Let me start by just kind of talking about the origin of this session. It was kind of twofold. It came out of a couple of different concepts. There were a lot of side conversations going on between representatives of Prime TSR, AWS, and Redox. I think all of us were having these conversations. We were noticing a couple of trends. One, we were hearing a lot of chatter around the Cures Act and all the new standards. And the chatter that we were hearing was honestly a lot of confusion and uncertainty. And I definitely think the Cures Act is one of those things where every time I look at it, I learn something new or I pick up on something else. And so we definitely felt that there was this was a good time to start talking about it and start sharing information. The other related thread was we were also having these conversations. We were noticing where there's so much focus on the data and the APIs, but we felt like we were losing some focus around where that leads us. You know, as we start to standardize and open up our data, what will that allow us to do? And so the punchline here is we start to embrace all of these standards. We think we can make better use of our data. And so I'm a big fan of this concept of this idea of living data. And so if you take care and you get everything organized, it's really an opportunity to do something with that data. And really, I think that's how this is where innovation comes into the equation. And so that's kind of the origin of this. Again, that word innovation. So when I see that, I instantly want to talk about it. I specifically want to talk about what it means. I have to say, in my past, there was a long period of time where I thought innovation just simply meant doing something cool. And I frankly, I just didn't understand what the word really meant. And I also saw from a previous life a lot of drama and angst around the idea of innovation in an environment where there were people that felt like because the work they were doing wasn't cool, they couldn't innovate. And that's not the case. And I think it starts with the meaning of the word. When you look at the true meaning, innovation it has nothing to do with cool. What it has to do with is doing something new, taking a different path or introducing something new into the equation. And I like to pause and think about that and talk about it because, again, I felt kind of silly when I literally had to go look it up in the dictionary to make sure I knew what I was talking about when I was kind of wrestling with some of that drama. The other way I like to think about it is I had to pull a Venn diagram into this. The other way I like to think about it is we can innovate, and again, that means we're doing something differently. In that space of innovation, there is going to be the potential for something to be cool, flashy, snazzy, all those things that I was talking about being cool. I think that's certainly in play, but it doesn't have to be everything in the spectrum of innovation. I think there are some things that maybe aren't as cool, but they're still, again, we're doing something differently. To me, what matters, and this is what I really want to focus on, is the impact that the innovation can have. I think that's all we really care about is the impact of doing things differently, whether it's cool or not. It needs to have an impact. And I also think baby steps are important in this too. I think there's this implication that innovation needs to be this big bang idea, and it doesn't. It can be baby steps as well, and you can have subtle innovations that over time can gain momentum and start to have a major impact. So anyways, I like to start the conversation there and just make sure when we talk about innovation, we're not isolating ourselves or really forcing us into a smaller scope of what we can talk about. The intent and purpose of today's session, what we're interested in doing with this group today is several things. One, we want to educate. So we want to provide information for you, that things that you can learn from, things that you can take away. For the people that filled out the survey that we had sent out, that was one of the big themes that I saw. A lot of people were coming to the session today to learn, which is great. The other thing, I want to give the audience, the participants here, a chance to share experiences and do something I call it group calibration. It's this idea of giving you a chance to get your bearings on where others are at, where peers or kindred organizations, finding out kind of where people are at in the spectrum of data and innovation. I think that's good to know, and it can start to give you a kind of a sense of where you're at, whether it be you're behind or you feel like you're ahead of the game, ahead of the curve. I think that's important to know. Again, the survey results that I saw, it sounded like a lot of people felt like they were heading in the right direction with regards to data, standards, innovation. It sounded like your organizations are doing some great things, which was good to hear. And so definitely, I think that's stuff we can talk about and share. And then the last point here is we also wanted to give you, another takeaway is information that you can bring back to your organizations that could potentially be an impetus for change. And dare I say innovation, right? It's hey, here are the things that we're hearing. I would love to, I think all of us, we'd love to plant a seed or plant an idea that could manifest into something that leads to bigger change. Last thing here, I mean, so suffice it to say, I would love to hear your voices. I think all of us, all the presenters, we're interested in dialogue here. So by all means, feel free to stop us or interrupt us as we're going along. And if there's questions or topics that we want to dwell on, I think we have enough time. And I'll be the timekeeper. And so when we do start to run low on time, I'll start to push us in a direction. So apologies up front if I'm being pushy with regards to time. Last but not least, I think the other thing I wanted to mention from the survey results, I also saw a profound interest in the technology. So it sounds like we have a pretty tech savvy group here. And so I do think we can start to angle some of these conversations and some of this dialogue more towards the technology stories and what's going on, maybe in some of the details. But again, if you got specific questions, by all means, please bring them up and we can talk about them. So that's the intent for today. From a talk track perspective, the topics that we're going to cover, and we're going to kind of break these down by each of the speakers. First and foremost, we're going to talk about the data standards. We're going to talk about the laws, the standards, the Cures Act, and give you a primer on what's going on, really help you understand the current scope and impact of the Cures Act. Again, every time I read it, I learn something new or I see something different. Next, then, we want to talk about this idea of, while you're embracing all these standards, it's also a great time to start thinking about, hey, how do I ensure I'm putting all of my data and all of my APIs in a what I call a safe and thriving home. So this is a place that you can put this valuable information and really maximize the value of that data. Something I said earlier, we want it to be living data. We want it to add value, not just to be data sitting there. That's the idea behind it. And so we'll talk about what that means and what could be a safe and thriving home for you. And then last but not least, if you take care of 1 and 2, that's the time then where you begin to put yourself into a position where innovation is attainable. You can start to embrace it and you can start to do things differently. And so we've got some stories that we'll talk about around embracing innovation. So that's the talk track. That's what we'll walk through. Some quick introductions then. So let's talk through the speakers for today. So I'll lead us off. My name is Matt Schaub. I'm a career architect and problem solver from Prime TSR. Prime TSR is a technology modernization cloud solutions consultancy. So we build cloud solutions and we help our clients. We deliver basically enterprise quality solutions that we get into the cloud with a focus on agility and speed. And that's something I'll talk about as part of the stories that I'll be telling. My job, my role with Prime is I'm responsible for maximizing the impact and the value in how we deliver. And so that's day to day, that's where I'm spending a lot of my time. Brian, let me turn it over to you if you want to do a quick introduction as well.
Yeah, good morning. Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Warwick. I'm a Senior Partner Solutions Architect for Healthcare and Life Sciences at AWS. I work with a lot of our global partners that are building healthcare solutions. I have a focus here at AWS a lot when it comes to like interoperability, electronic health records, and work that's being done in the provider space. So looking forward to talking to you all today.
Great, thanks, Brian. I just realized I put the speakers in like reverse order. I don't know why I did it that way. Matt Ripke, Matt, go ahead. You're the real Matt. You can do an introduction.
Yeah, the second Matt. Nice to meet everybody. My name is Matt Ripke. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships over at Redox, where I focus mainly on commercialization and go-to-market with some of our newer verticals, and so new places that we're integrating data, and that's a lot of cloud. It's a lot of working with Brian and team AWS. It's a lot of figuring out, besides the EHR, where else does data need to be sent and received, and how do we structure that and get it all consolidated from all these different legacy interfaces into a FHIR structure. Prior to that, I was one of the original team members of Redox, and so for the last 6 years, I have been sitting in between technology vendors and health systems, brokering conversations on how we get things implemented, how we get things scaled, the best ways to integrate, the most secure ways to exchange data. So plenty of experience in the trenches with all sorts of different digital health vendors. Excited to be here today.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. And so let's just jump right in. Let's get into this talk track. Again, I think we have a lot to talk about. I'm a little concerned about time, but we'll see how it goes as we're going along here. Matt, you're going to lead us off then. I mean, we're going to start with this primer on the new data laws, the standards, and the Cures Act.
Yeah. So if you want to go ahead and just click into it, so we'll start here and let everybody look at the pretty picture. But just background on why I'm the guy here talking to you about data standards and legislation. Redox connects all sorts of different healthcare vendors with the technologies that they use every day, right? Our whole ethos and reason for existing is that we think it's ridiculous that every different vendor used to go and build individual integrations to each of their customer sites when those customers buy all sorts of vendors on the other side. And so we put in place a reusable set of pipes that digital health vendors connect to in order to get downstream into health systems and back and forth, right? Full bidirectional integration. We're connected with about 2,000 healthcare systems, and so that's everyone from the top 25 health systems in America all the way through provider groups and clinics and physical therapy facilities, et cetera. We work with about 350, that's probably a little higher at this point, different digital health applications and vendors. And those go from very famous companies you've heard about to two guys in a dream working on their patient engagement app, trying to figure out how do we get our first health system. We manage about 12,000 interfaces across those 2,000 connected health systems. And so it's a lot of VPNs, it's a lot of configurations. We're connected on top of that to all sorts of HIEs, Commonwealth Care Quality, and then as of COVID here, 49 of the public health departments where we found the need to send COVID test results and COVID information pretty quickly and at scale for all sorts of different vendors. All in all, we're doing about 28 million, closing in on 30 million patient records per day. And that means that we have to be able to broker all sorts of different languages, standards, variants. And so anytime anybody writes a law that says we're going to try to make this easier, it is right in my front of mind to figure out how does this work? How do we make this, make use of this? Because as you can see from this image here, it's a bit of a web, right, of different systems using different technologies in different formats. So Matt, if you give me a click here, and I'm just going to go ahead and tell you when to do it. We'll go from that. So Cures Act comes out, right? And it says, hey, we're going to mandate that vendors start to open up and exchange data in modern APIs. And for the guy who hangs out in modern healthcare APIs all day, it was awesome. But when it finally got all the way through and got to being passed, the true power of the mandate turns out to be a little bit limited, right? And so the constraints exist everywhere. EHR vendors can't really publish everything that they've been doing in HL7 and API in 6 months. It's a resource constraint like we all have, right? We all have development budgets and timelines, and so it takes a minute to be able to roll these out. And the larger EHR vendors are doing a nice job because they've got the development resources to do it, but you see the long tail of other EHR vendors that are meeting kind of the minimum legally required mandated use cases. And so when we work with our customers who, again, work across all sorts of different workflows from, care coordination to telemedicine to orders and results to medical diagnostics, we looked at and said, okay, how many of those workflows are covered by these new mandated vendor APIs? And the numbers were actually pretty stunning to us. You can see them right here, right? It was just over half are partially covered. Less than 10% could do their entire workflow with mandated FHIR APIs as they are today. So Matt, give me another click here. The reason for that is into this complexity, right? So on the left-hand side of this table, you see simple, unidirectional, and bidirectional. When I talk about simple interoperability, I'm talking about a Commonwealth type use case where you send in some patient identifiers and you receive a very basic clinical summary back. And that market is essentially become commoditized at this point, right? You can work with any number of people to get you Commonwealth access or care quality access. Where you step up a level in your app design and in your product workflow is in the unidirectional exchange. And so that might be things like consuming an ADT feed out of a hospital for all discharge appointments. It might be consuming a scheduling feed to be able to keep up with an up-to-date patient schedule. The click further than that, and where a lot of applications who are really driving value in the provider setting are operating, is in bidirectional workflow. And that means that not only am I consuming patient resources, I'm also creating some sort of value and sending something back into that EHR. And that might be, simple as a note. We have plenty of groups that just send in a PDF of what the app output was and what happened within that app use case. We have people who want to push back in charges and claims and DFTs and make sure that people are compensated for whenever they're using the app. And we have it tied to inventory management systems, right? And so when we talk about how to scale digital health technology within a provider setting, we tell people, come in and you want your data ask to be proportional to the infrastructure lift that you're asking for, right? So, or the value that you're creating, sorry. So when you're asking them to stand up 5 or 6 interfaces for you, you want to be able to make sure that you're providing a ton of data value back for a large enough patient population and a large enough amount of the providers. And the stickier you get is really the more data that you're able to get flowing back and forth between those systems and value created both in your app and then back in their main EHR system, which requires that bidirectional aspect. So groups might start their app functionality with the simple interoperability, but as they scale and as they listen to what their customers are asking for, they very quickly move into unidirectional exchange and pretty quickly after that move into full bidirectionality. And this is important even if you're doing things like keeping track of demographic updates or scheduling appointments in a different system, right? You have to be able to keep those in sync if somebody updates insurance, et cetera, right? So Matt, give me one more click here. So when we look at what are actual apps doing today, right? What are those 400 different applications and vendors doing at those 2,000 health systems? Well, over half of them are doing those bidirectional workflows, and the rest, the vast majority of the rest are doing at least unidirectional consumption. Simple interoperability layer exists, but it's just not that popular because again, it just doesn't give you that much depth of data. Matt, one more.
Yeah, and hey Matt, a real quick question. Can we assume too? I think there's a pretty big data sample here.
Sure.
Do we think that this is? Can we assume this is also the trend? Outside of Redox's 2000, like do we feel like this is maybe an industry representative of the industry, or is it unique to the Redox network?
We probably skew a little bit more towards complex integrations, right?
Yeah.
For folks that are working with an interoperability partner like Redox, it's to handle complexity at scale. I would say probably for the stats majors on the line here, there's probably a longer tail of the simple interoperability groups than what we're observing in this sample. But that said, they're in different use cases, right? You cannot sell a scheduling tool to a provider without bidirectional integration. You can do a virtual first primary clinic where you might be, download my app from the Super Bowl ad, put in your info, I run a quick care quality summary, I pull back a basic clinical summary, and we go from there. But when you're I would say the simple interoperability probably skews more a little bit to the direct-to-consumer models that you're seeing today, but that's not where the majority of money and data are being sent and spent, right? That's in the provider.
That makes a lot of sense. That's one of those questions where, as I asked it, in my mind, I'm like, oh wait, no, I think I know the answer. Yeah, I mean, your clients are in the Redox network probably because they are a little more lean more towards the sophisticated or more challenging requirements. So that probably does skew you a little bit more towards the higher, the more complex, higher complexity.
Sure, and I think what we're getting at here with this Cures Act is, look, the legislation came from a great spot, and yes, we do want more open APIs from all EHR vendors, because if anybody's worked with EHR vendors, they can play some games that are not so much fun. And so we look at it and we go, okay, great. And then you look at what's actually in the mandate, and it's like, oh gosh, we almost got to what people actually need, right? So, our hope is that over the next few years, it becomes more and more of these mandated bidirectional workflows. And I think the groups that are working with Redox are probably shortcutting that timeline, and they're able to get experience, before the EHR vendors are mandated to make it available via Fire API. We're still doing it with CDA with XML. So
that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So we look at, again, and just, kind of hammering it home here, but we look at the impact of Cures on these different workflows. And from the simple interoperability side of things, it's a significant impact, right? All the new EHRs, all the EHRs have to provide new API endpoints that allow for this type of interaction. And so this can truly become a do-it-yourself, build-it-yourself, manage-it-yourself experience. You likely won't need to work with as many of the brokers as you probably had to in the past. But as you scale your workflow up and as you have different needs, especially consuming real-time feeds, from non-US CDI core data sets, it doesn't have as much of an impact as you'd expect. And so as we move forward in the next 3, 5, 10 years, our hope is that it starts to slide down this table and more towards that bidirectional. But the fact of the matter is, right now, if you're building complex workflows, Cures is not as impactful as we probably hope. So let's talk just quickly about the impact on auth methods as well, because this is something that, as tricky as the interfaces are, the auth methods for different health systems and different EHRs can be equally as frustrating. So there are three essential auth methods that we're talking about when you're connecting your application to an EHR, and that's the patient-mediated, the provider-mediated, and the backend system, right? And so patient-mediated, I think everybody's familiar with the patient portal and consent access. Provider, log in with your provider credentials and access, and then the backend systems, which are really, BAA governed, open interface, point-to-point application integrations. Click for me. So again, you take a look at what you use each of these for. I'd be really interested when we get to more of the discussion on what types of applications you all are building, but the feasibility really speaks to kind of where you see these different ones. Provider mediated, we really don't see a ton of. Patient mediated is becoming more and more of a thing, specifically as the new laws around payer access force payers to engage more directly with their populations via digital health. The backend system is widely applicable and is really the most common thing that we see, right? Signing BAAs with your health system and opening up that pipe. One more for me. So you look at the current landscape of how this exists, right? And so they have mainly simple sign-on and SSO via the Smart on Fire protocols. You have some sort of unidirectional exchange as you get more towards the backend system, where you can do some custom authentications. In terms of the actual data interfaces, you can see you're dealing with Fire, CDA, HL7 V2s. Remember, HL7 V2s differ from health system to health system. And so Fire is attempting to simplify these gaps, but you can see that there's still some holes in what this mandate outlines for what developers can reasonably expect for all different types of data exchange. And so, again, sort of incomplete matrix at this point.
Mm-hmm. And Matt, I'm trying to understand the red X is does that mean not applicable? Like
No,
we don't see those scenarios being necessary.
Yeah. No, it doesn't exist today. Sorry.
Oh, got it. Okay, so it doesn't exist today, but it could. There's potential for it at some point.
Right. There's currently a gap in some sort of mandated standard for how that exists.
I got you.
And, you know, you're coming up with that on a client by client basis.
Got it. I see. Thank you.
So we're going to talk for a second about the need for a hybrid integration. So the one thing that I didn't mention with any of this is that in its current state, the mandates are for what's called US CDI, which is the common, it's going to be the US Common Data, I screwed up the acronym, but it's the core data interface. It's largely structured around CDA, for those of you familiar, and the CCD documents. But it's a basic patient snapshot with basic medical history and conditions, appointments, medications, et cetera. And so you look and see, you know, what the mandated integrations versus the supported integrations and required integrations just from our customer base look like. And it really only fills 2 of the boxes. And so all those other non-mandated integrations are stuff that we do every single day with all sorts of vendors that fall outside of something that the government is telling EHR vendors you have to make standard. And so one of the concerns about this read-only FHIR is in any sort of bidirectional integration, you've got to figure out a new way to push back in because none of the EHR vendors have inbound FHIR resources. So in most circumstances, we see groups that might be building a workflow that is 5 total interfaces, and 2 of those might be FHIR APIs, 3 of them might be HL7 interfaces. And so that's what we mean when we say a hybrid integration. You are figuring out how to query patient resources or set up polling for patient resource updates, and you're also consuming real-time HL7 events and being able to translate those into a FHIR API and consume them as if they were FHIR resources. And so, again, when you're coming up with your application architecture, it's important to understand what data you need, what interfaces that data exists on and how it can be sent and received, and then what frequency those interfaces are going to update that data for you. And so you look at like consuming an ADT feed, you might be consuming 2.5 million messages a day at a large health system versus querying 2.5 million patient resources for updates, which is a completely different problem to solve, right? And so we tell groups a lot, be careful and be wary of building out fully scoped workflows based on what the legislation says is the standard and what should be acceptable, and then going to market with that and saying, hey, I built it to how they told me and what they said would be available, because a lot of the times you're going to get there and find that you have to go a step further and you have to add an HL7 feed inbound, or you have to add a different resource and consume something because they don't have the FHIR resources installed yet. So you're consuming an SIU HL7 feed. And so it's just important when you're designing application workflows to consider that these resources exist. You're still likely going to have to leverage legacy interfaces as well. And so be set up for that kind of hybrid architecture, right? There's a webhook that's consuming API feeds, and then there's a VPN that's got an HL7 feed pumping through it, maybe some CCD, et cetera.
Hey Matt, I'm maybe put you on the spot. Why is that? Like, in your opinion, like, is the mandate just not properly defined? Do they realize that it's not telling you everything?
It's really difficult, as is proof by the fact that this is like the 5th or 6th standard that we're on at this point. It's really difficult to get everybody to agree how we should do something the same way. And at the same time, again, I think there's some serious constraints about what these EHR vendors are able to reasonably start producing on a timeline. And so, you look at it, and like any piece of legislation, it starts here, and then we discuss and we see what's reasonable, and then it ends over there, right? And do we wish that it was perhaps maybe a little bit more expansive and covered more of these use cases? Sure. Do we understand completely the limitations that require EHR vendors to not be able to do this? Yeah, we get that too.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So This is more of just a couple of nice, pretty diagrams that talk about or that visualize what we just explained. But you can see you've got the fire consumption. You might have some HL7 as well. You are writing back to the EHR using HL7, and you've got to be able to have both the product and features of what your application does right next to the integration. How do I connect it to my customer infrastructure, which continues to scale as you sign up more customers, right? So click for me. So we talk about like how much of your company is spent on the profit centers versus how much of your company development resources are spent on your cost centers. And the way we look at this, again, the fact that we think people shouldn't build unique integrations into each of their customers when their customers are sending that data to some other party as well. This is exactly what we're talking about, right? So you have to end up going in and building VPNs, HL7 feeds, fire configurations, API polling. You have to set up and manage those configuration tables, those filters, those VPNs as they go down. You have to be subscribed for any updates or any changes for any of those HL7 feeds coming out of any of your customer groups. And pretty quickly, you know, we survey groups a lot and say, okay, so you're not partnered with us. How much of your cost and your developers are focused on infrastructure versus R&D? And it's staggering. It's typically a 50-50 split. And so, you know, you think about it, it's a linear scaling issue. Every time you sign up a new customer, you have that much new infrastructure to build, support, and maintain. And you've got to scale a team that can manage that if you decide to go at this alone. But of course, like any good webinar, this is the point where I tell you we solve all your problems. This is where we sit in the equation. So we, again, the Redox network and the Redox engine sit in between health systems and their applications that they use every day, right? And so we are the team that is building to those HL7 feeds, keeping up with the filter changes, managing all those VPNs. And the cool thing that we can do, a little bit different than any other integration vendor that you might have heard of or been working with, is that when vendor number one goes into health system here on the top right and sets up that fire, that HL7 outbound and the HL7 inbound, when vendor number two gets purchased by that health system, and it might be for something completely unrelated, right? A medical device vendor and a telemedicine company. And when vendor number one goes in and builds the infrastructure with Redox, vendor number two can connect through Redox to that exact same client set. So the health system doesn't actually have to set up a whole new set of HL7 feeds, a whole new fire API, et cetera. And the application can simply tap into reusable infrastructure that 400 other vendors are putting into place with their sales teams every single day. And so that's kind of the model and where we sit here. But the idea is if you can get it all back to a consistent fire API, and you can take out the vendor variations in fire, you can take out the site-specific variations in HL7, then you can bring everybody back a normalized, consistent fire standard. And once you've got it to that, where you've really truly got all the other interfaces back to a single fire API, then you can start to do, Matt, what you talked about on the innovation side. You can really start to open up the application workflows. For the first time ever, you can bring disparate systems and disparate languages into a single format and be able to do things like build compelling AI, right? One of the big issues in AI in healthcare is, and why it's, why it's struggled, to be honest, to get off the ground, is that it's difficult to get enough data to run a model that can learn something smart and provide some value back, because it's just too difficult to get all these silos tied together. Well, one of the things we're really excited about with AWS is that for the first time, you can get all of these fire, HL7, CDA, XML, bring it back to a consistent fire standard, put it in into HealthLake, and be able to run really compelling models on top of it. And so, you look at kind of the way I think about it is we are filling in kind of a pothole-laden street. And once we get that freshly paved over, we'll be able to really, truly build some cool stuff on top of it. And I'm excited that, Cures is pushing us more towards that, and then the private market is picking it up and solving a lot of the problems even quicker.
Yeah, and like I'm gonna wreck the metaphor, but like it makes sense. It's cool that you're offering that street to a lot of people, so they don't have to recreate or make their own streets. That's, to me, that's the kind of what's compelling in the equation too. How often are you guys, Matt? How often does are you changing things behind the scenes? How like what's the frequency with which there's updates made to the Redox products kind of sitting in there?
So the Redox, we run on pretty continuous development loop, right? So we're shipping new products all the time to our application side, software side users. In terms of the management and the maintenance of the health system side, we have a team that works all day, every day, and is just constantly working through filter changes. And this VPN went down because somebody screwed something up on the other side, and we're pulling a VPN back up, and we're replaying messages, and we're, so yeah, that is a constant daily thing. But if you think about it, that's the value that we're providing. We're saying, hey,
exactly.
Each of you, all of you vendors need to have a team that does this, or we can have one big team that does this, and you guys can all work with us and focus on building cool products and actually building the experience layer, right?
Yeah.
And that's
and that's what's compelling about that initial diagram of the ecosystem, the network. It's like it's safety in numbers. And I also think what you're talking about here, there's a theme throughout all of this, and it's the let the mundane or the regular stuff get taken care of to allow you to focus on the harder things, the bigger challenges. And I think that theme comes up constantly throughout this deck.
I mean, you think about so assume that each vendor is spending 30 to 50% of their development resources just on infrastructure, right? And then look at how many problems healthcare still has with bad software and just needs better tech, period. And you think okay, well, if 30 to 50% of the development resources in the entire market are just worried about consuming data and keeping VPNs up, how can we ever possibly deliver the appropriate level of a technical experience that people get in banking and in retail and in the rest of their consumer lives? And so that's where, we look at it and we're just like, okay, this is really silly. Let's build something that fixes this and let these teams get on to building really cool patient-facing experiences that make healthcare suck a little less.
Yeah, right on. That's compelling. Great, Matt. Thank you for that. We're gonna start to transition. I mean, before we transition, feel free to speak up if anybody had any specific questions. I think suffice it to say, there's a lot going on and a lot of energy for everyone to get organized, to get on that road that Matt said was being paved, which is great. And again, but it's where does this lead us? And that's kind of where I want to pivot into our next topic. Oh, Brian, we need to do the handoff here. Let me make you the presenter.
I'm just happy for Brian. I've seen him present before.
All right, high expectation, Brian. Don't let us down.
I'll try not to.
So Brian's going to take over here. Our next topic is about having that safe, what I call the safe and thriving home for your data to live, grow, and to get value out of it.
Yeah. So before I jump in, again, thank you all for joining us today. I'm a senior partner solutions architect for healthcare and life sciences, and like Matt was talking about, really trying to focus on innovation, not having to worry about the underlying infrastructure to support really all the stuff that's required to even allow all this to happen. And then being in an environment where you're secure from the ground up, but also can take advantage of the ever-growing number of services and innovations that are done on your behalf. That's what we do at AWS. And we're constantly innovating on your behalf. 90% of what we build is based on what our customers are asking us to build. And so I'm going to focus the conversation. I'll talk a lot about AI/ML in this presentation, but definitely please feel free to ask questions along the way. And keep in mind that AI/ML is just one small piece of the much larger puzzle when it comes to building a really compelling infrastructure and architecture in AWS that allows you to go forward and innovate. But first, it's important to talk about this kind of modern data strategy. And it's clear that harnessing data is the next wave of digital transformation. And so when you first think about modernizing your infrastructure with that scalable, trusted, and secure cloud provider, organizations that are running legacy on-prem data stores or self-managing still have to take care of management tasks such as, you have your database provisioning, patching, configuration, or backups. And so with AWS, we can take care of all that for you, and you can benefit from AWS's unmatched experience, our maturity, our reliability, our security, and performance that you can depend upon for your most important applications. Secondly, when it comes to unifying that data, to put your data to work with a secure and well-governed access to data, using the best of both data lakes and your purpose-built data stores. I'll talk about that here in a little bit. But when we talk about data lakes, I don't know if those of you here are familiar with the term, but the idea is, in healthcare, we typically have like a data warehouse where it's kind of more structured and you put your data in, you organize it. The idea behind a data lake is you just bring your data in, you store it, and then you figure it out and build reports from it or new experiences from that data. So by bringing it all together, you can make decisions quickly, but you also need, because you're bringing all that data together, you need things that can scale and grow as your needs change. And you want to also be able to connect all of that together from your data lake, the data warehouse, all the other purpose-built data stores in a coherent system that is secure and well-governed. So AWS helps you do this through the best of both data lakes and purpose-built data stores. But thirdly, when it comes to innovation, especially creating those new experiences, reimagining old processes with AI/ML. So machine learning is one of the most disruptive technologies of our generation. It can help create entirely new opportunities, help you make better and faster decisions, lead to better clinical decision support, improve your operational efficiencies of your organization. And so, the idea here is to really start bringing all of your data together. And so to do new and exciting things. Now, the first important thing to understand, though, is that when you bring all your data to AWS, you need to make sure it's secured and that you're in a place that you can continue to grow with that meets your regulatory and compliance needs. And so at AWS, we do have more than 130 HIPAA eligible services. And these are a wide range of services, from storage to compute to machine learning services that you can take advantage of so you can focus on innovation. We also have more than 60 high trust certified services on AWS. And you can actually inherit high trust controls to aid your compliance efforts when you're on AWS. And then when it comes to GDPR at AWS, we have a ton of companies that are building and meeting their GDPR requirements on AWS. So we have the compliance in place to help support your needs. And security is job zero here at AWS. That's the number one thing we're focused on constantly. And so ensuring that you have the proper guardrails in place before you go forward and innovate is key. And so to meet those data like residency requirements, for example, like if you're in Europe or Canada, we have the concept of regions at AWS. We don't replicate data anywhere else. You control what happens to your data, where it lives, and if you choose to move it around, you can. AWS has global scale, so you can, if you wanted to take advantage of that global scale, say you wanted to fail over in a disaster recovery scenario to even another region, that's entirely possible. We also offer encryption at scale, so you can use your own keys, or you can allow AWS to manage keys for you. And when it comes to complying with local privacy laws, you have full control over everything you do in your AWS account. AWS doesn't see what you're putting in there. It is your data. And we have, we're certified to run top secret workloads and are doing so on AWS. And the idea is that by taking advantage of all this investment that AWS has made in security and that we continue to do in security, you can build that compliant infrastructure on us using our services and tools. Now, when it comes to machine learning, AWS has been the vendor of choice for over 100,000 customers. And we are the leader, according to Gartner, in offering the broadest and deepest compute infrastructure for AI, ML, and training and inference. So customers can choose from a range of Amazon compute instances based on the latest CPUs and GPUs, and custom accelerators, coupled with industry-leading networking and storage to meet your performance requirements. We're also investing and innovating to deliver a range of high performance and low cost infrastructure options. So you can choose to build a platform that best meets your needs. And we are innovating to further lower cost of infrastructure for customers. We're actually building our own silicon now from the ground up, optimized for machine learning inference performance. And we've leveraged our learnings from our Graviton CPU and Nitro system innovations to build what we call our inference chip, which is a custom AWS chip that delivers the lowest cost of inference in the cloud. And by running machine learning workloads on AWS, customers get on-demand access to high performance, low cost, and easy to use infrastructure for training and deploying machine learning models. So you've probably heard about machine learning a lot, but I'm going to take a step back. And for those on the call who aren't, you hear the terms thrown around all the time. But when we talk about, well, let's first talk about AI. So AI is a way to describe any system that can replicate tasks that previously required human intelligence. So almost always, this is related to some kind of complex decision making where human judgment would be required. And most use cases for AI are looking for a probabilistic outcome, like making a prediction or a decision with a high degree of certainty, similar to human judgment. But almost all AI systems today are created using machine learning, which uses large amounts of data to create and validate decision logic, known as a model. So the AI application then feeds input data into that model, and the model outputs human-like decisions. So machine learning is the underlying technology that is powering intelligent systems. Now, deep learning is a type of machine learning that uses a technique known as deep neural networks. These systems replicate how the human brain actually functions, and this lets AI systems address more complex use cases than previously possible. And what's really interesting about machine learning is that it just continues to accelerate. It is, it went from being an aspirational technology to mainstream extremely fast. For a long time, the technology was limited to a few major tech companies and hardcore academic researchers, but things began to change when cloud computing entered the mainstream. And when compute power and data became more available, and quite literally machine learning is now making impact across every industry, from like finance, retail, fashion, real estate, and now healthcare. And that's where myself as a solutions architect for healthcare and life sciences, I get really excited. And we work daily with customers building solutions around this. But it's moving from that peripheral to now a core part of every business and every industry.
Brian, it's kind of ironic, right? It's getting smarter.
Yeah.
And smarter over time. I really like those slides. Brian, I'm glad you brought those out. I think we are seeing it more and more. We're seeing it on TV. I feel like if I'm watching something, there's at least one commercial that mentions AI ML, and they always say it together. And so I think understanding the different kind of the relationships is super important. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Now, a couple examples here aren't healthcare related, but I want to call them out because what we're seeing our healthcare customers do is they're looking at other industries and realizing like, wow, there's some really innovative things happening over there that are applicable to healthcare as well. So let's just take a look at a couple of what customers have been doing So, for example, like with customer experience, Intuit has built forecasting capabilities to predict call center demand on a particular day or time to make sure customer service agents are adequately staffed. And you think about this in healthcare, like when it comes to digital front door, I'm working with a lot of partners right now, really interested in improving the patient experience and also forecasting what that demand is going to look like for their health systems. And obviously during COVID, when a lot of our healthcare customers were standing up field hospitals, being able to forecast was key to being able to meet that demand. In transportation, level 5 is developing a self-driving system for the Lyft network to ensure access to the benefits of this technology for millions of riders. And the company actually standardized on a service we have called Amazon SageMaker, which allows you to build any model easily for training across the engineering team. So level 5 reduced their model training time from days to just a couple hours. Now in healthcare, I'm sure we all know Cerner. They are a big AWS partner, and they are building all their EHR on AWS, and they're tapping into our deep portfolio of machine learning and AI services, including services that I'll talk about here a little bit, like we have Transcribe Medical, but really to surface insights that will help their healthcare provider customers streamline operations and provide more personalized patient care. And they've already developed a model that predicts congestive heart failure, and they continue to build on us. But then we'll take lastly, like the NFL. We've been working with the NFL to create like next gen stats. You've probably seen it on TV to really engage fans by combining old and new data to reveal insights about the game dynamics for both fans and players. And we've now developed over 20 unique next gen stats that are being used on screen during games in real time by broadcasters and partners online for fans and more. So really kind of neat examples of how machine learning are being used today. But we're just scratching the surface of the impact that machine learning can have across industries and geographies. So it's really exciting. But here at Amazon, we've been applying machine learning in areas such as personalization or supply chain for more than 20 years. And it's integral to what we do at Amazon and how we can be successful. And we've improved that original personalization model significantly over time and moved it to other products such as Amazon Prime. So at Amazon, we use machine learning throughout our fulfillment process, including developing a forecast system to predict the appropriate amount of demand for each product we sell worldwide in order to deliver on our customer expectations for convenience, cost, and delivery speed. And we've also developed natural language processing technology to give customers an entirely new way to interact with technology through, I'm not going to say her name because she'll go off right here next to me, Alexa. And we're also developing technology with like autonomous flight and like for prime air drones and using robotics in our fulfillment centers to get packages faster. So there isn't a single department at Amazon that hasn't been touched by machine learning. And because machine learning is one of the most disruptive technologies we're going to encounter in our generation, more than 100,000 customers use AWS for machine learning today, from creating more personalized customer experiences like we talked about to delivering, even like in pharma, like personalized pharmaceuticals. But the machine learning journey is not always a straightforward path, and achieving success with machine learning requires more than just great technology. It also means ensuring that the organization is aligned to the right goals. And identifying and reaching those goals will necessitate broad changes in processes, management, culture. There are some steps customers can take to overcome challenges that often impede progress and help you get moving in the right direction. So data is often cited as the #1 challenge in adopting ML. Matt was talking about kind of that a little earlier about how you have all these in healthcare, all these different data models and trying to align on a common data model. And in our experience, we find that more than half of time in building machine learning models is spent in just that data wrangling, the cleanup, the pre-processing, and then next you need to understand where to apply that machine learning and to find the right use case that solves a real problem. And you need to focus on developing your team that you will work on, that's going to work on machine learning. To make meaningful machine learning transformation, you also have to have a blend of technical experts and domain experts that are working backwards from a problem. And so where domain experts can ensure the right data is being collected and the solution is impactful to the organization. And then when we talk about championing and a machine learning culture, machine learning requires a cultural shift that's driven from the top. At its core, ML is experimentation that gets better over time. So organizations must also embrace failures and take a long-term view of what's possible. It's essential to have like an executive sponsor for this to be successful. And lastly, don't do the undifferentiated heavy lifting, so you can focus on the right work that truly creates value for like your clinicians and your patient population or your employees at your healthcare organization. Instead, just let other companies do this for you. Like we have partners like Redox was just talking about, or building on AWS. So you don't have to worry about all the kind of nuts and bolts just to make that happen. And then start the process again with the next machine learning opportunity. Identify something and work backwards from that. When we talk about working backwards here at Amazon, what that means really is identifying a problem first and then figuring out how are you going to go about solving that problem and what steps you need to take to get there, as opposed to just taking a bunch of technology and just throwing it at something and seeing if there's something that kind of sticks. It really is important to find that problem, get the right sponsors involved, and work from that to solve it. Now, as you're getting started in your machine learning journey, AWS is the right partner to help you. The first step is establish a solid data strategy. As we discussed, a good strategy is the foundation for transformation and innovation through technologies like analytics and machine learning. But next is to understand your company's business challenges so we can identify the right use case to address those needs. Like I was talking about, what are you trying to solve for using machine learning? And we do have a number of training and education programs available to help you and your team learn. We have partners as well, like Prime TSR and Redox, who can help you also along that journey. Now, if you've started and you want acceleration on your ML journey, we can help you in a variety of ways. We have machine learning across like horizontal use cases and a lot of case studies out there, but also the technology to allow you to do interesting things in different areas. So for example, and I'll talk about that here in the next slide, but the ability to add quickly some additional capability to like an application or a solution where you can add intelligence to it and you don't have to go build a model. Now, we also at AWS have vertical specific solutions. So in the healthcare space, I'll talk about that here in a minute as well, purpose-built healthcare AI services. So again, where you don't have to go build your own model, you let Amazon build that for you, and you essentially just ask it a question and it tells you like a confidence score back on the results. But if you do want to build your own models, we do have Amazon SageMaker, which makes it easy for anyone to get started to go build and deploy their own custom ML models. But speaking of that machine learning kind of stack, so when we talk about machine learning at AWS, we talk about it as being kind of 3 layers. The bottom layer are your core frameworks and infrastructure. So PyTorch, MXNet, TensorFlow. You have the ability to run all of that natively on AWS, but that does require having machine learning experts on staff that know how to go and build in those. As you move up the stack, we have AI services like, we have SageMaker, where you have the ability, like I mentioned before, you can go in and build any model that you want. And there are a variety of things that you can take advantage of within like SageMaker Studio when it comes to like data collection, features, detecting bias or drift in your models. But where we see a lot of interest from healthcare customers is this sort of top layer of the stack, the sort of AI as a service and solutions built around that. So for example, like if you want to use vision in your solution, we have Amazon Recognition, where it's really easy to go in and you upload some photos and you can label them within the AWS console, even say, this is a stethoscope, or you can build custom models like really quickly. It's really fun to get in there and use. But as you move across, like when it comes to speech, doing speech to text or text to speech, like with Amazon Poly, we keep seeing healthcare integrate these top AI services. And so in the healthcare space, and I have a slide specific to that near the end, we have a variety of services from like transcribe medical to do medical transcriptions, or comprehend medical to get medical comprehension from text. The great thing about that top layer as well is that you don't have to host anything. Like I mentioned, you just ask the model a question through like an API call or using the service, and you get the answer back. So with these pre-trained AI services that provide ready-made intelligence for your applications and workflows, you can easily integrate these with your applications to address those common use cases. So from like personalized recommendations, or modernizing a contact center, or improving safety and security or engagement. From like we talk about chatbots, and especially when it comes to digital front door, and during COVID, there were a lot of chatbots that customers stood up to have like COVID chatbots and triaging. Because we use the same deep learning technology that powers like Amazon.com though, and our machine learning services, you get to take advantage of that quality and the accuracy from continuously learning APIs. And best of all, these AI services don't require machine learning experience. And ML can be applied to many different common challenges across various business functions in different industry verticals. So when you talk about like enhancing customer experience and the patient experience, to improving productivity of technical teams, these machine learning use cases help optimize tasks that are complex, expensive, and require human overhead. And AWS allows multiple easy-to-use AI services to tackle these common use cases where, like I said, no prior ML experience is required. And then I mentioned, if you do want to build your own models, we do have SageMaker. But what's interesting in healthcare is we're starting to see a lot of crossover, like I mentioned before, of like, especially when it comes to like fraud detection or intelligence search. In other types of services that we have that are not necessarily, like a healthcare specific AI service, people are recognizing that, when a patient calls in and talks to a call center, is there a way to take load off the call center? Is there a way to get data from those interactions? How's the patient feeling in that interaction? All these things that happen at the digital front door, combining that with like the clinical data that might exist on the patient, trying to build new models from that. So a lot of really interesting use cases that I'm seeing customers currently working on where they're leveraging these different services that you typically might see more of in like finance or retail. And especially when it comes to like this machine learning across industries, like in healthcare in particular, like reducing cost is like a huge driver. Population health use cases, improving patient outcomes. In the pharmaceutical space, we have, like, for example, like Moderna built on AWS, so that discovery and manufacturing of new drugs. So it's interesting how every day, we talk to customers that have these amazing ideas about how they can improve the patient or the clinician or even their employees' experience by using AI ML and AWS. So I did mention that we do have healthcare specific AI services. Earlier this year, it was in July, we launched Amazon Health Lake. Again, so I mentioned we have 130 plus HIPAA eligible services. So all these are obviously HIPAA eligible, but Health Lake allows you to bring in your FHIR data, and it automatically runs natural language processing on it, on the unstructured data, and it'll pull out things and surface it and make it searchable to you for things like ICD-10 codes or RX norm. It'll look for, like, if you have a clinical note you bring in, it will look for like anatomy or PHI. If you mention a medication, it'll associate dosage with that medication in the RX norm. But we also have, I mentioned, like Comprehend Medical, which allows you to kind of do that same thing, but on just like pure unstructured text. We do have Transcribe Medical for doing medical transcription, so speech to text. Textract is being used heavily in healthcare when it comes to, especially like in claims processing, to take text out of a document. And then I mentioned Rekognition earlier when it comes to like medical image and video analysis. Let's see. So to kind of wrap it up, just a couple high-level use cases here. When searching information like is expensive and time-consuming, you think about how much time is spent just trying to build like a good search engine. We have a service called Amazon Kindra, which is a ready-to-use intelligent search powered by AI, where no machine learning is required. And so Magellan Health took advantage of that service to really improve productivity within their organization. Another example where, and this is more with C-SPAN, but they're using Rekognition to do image and video analysis. So as we move down, like you think about the NHS, they've been doing a ton of work on AWS, and they have been doing a lot of work with Amazon Connect, which is our contact center service. So for example, with Amazon Connect, you can go out there and provision a contact center that people can call into within minutes, and you pay like pennies, like per hour, for standing up that phone number, and then you can have that contact center, because everything in AWS works together. You can actually use, people can call in, they can talk to a chat bot, Amazon Lex, and then they can from there like query backend electronic health record data. So it's a really common like voice scheduling or upcoming appointment reminders, medication. Like there are a lot of use cases we're seeing customers use Amazon Connect, and the NHS leverages it heavily.
It's super, it's super applicable.
Yeah,
across so many different industries and scenarios. It's really, that example is really cool.
And then everyone's familiar with Lyft. Lyft is building their own models using SageMaker. We have a screenshot here of kind of what SageMaker looks like when you get in and start to build. But they're using this to reduce costs, and by migrating machine learning workloads from on-prem to AWS. And it's helped increase team productivity and reduce cost. But also, when you look at the savings, like, and the scale that somebody like Lyft operates at, saving 90% on training, or when it comes to inference, 75%, and you have or 54% lower TCO. Like that's a massive amount of savings by just leveraging and building on AWS. And
it pays for itself.
Yeah, and so Gartner has released its 2021 scorecard for SageMaker, and they've given an overall score of 86 out of 100. So, you can go out there and encourage you to look at Gartner when it comes to not just machine learning ratings, but also like cloud providers. We're really proud of our Gartner ratings. And I did talk about Kyndra. What's interesting about Kyndra is, and I remember when I worked at a hospital system, there was always this challenge of you have all these disparate kind of databases, and really trying to provide search capabilities across that. So if, like, for a patient portal, for example, or like, what are the hours of this urgent care location? Like, we have customers that are building like true patient portals that are actually powered by Kyndra. So it makes it really easy, where essentially you take Kyndra, you point it to some database, some websites, it'll crawl it all for you, and you can actually you can also hook Kyndra up to chatbots, which is really exciting. So you can have a lot of the architecture that you build and how it connects to things can also power other experiences that you provide patients and clinicians, whether it be through voice or mobile or like a website. We also have 3M building on AWS. This is an example where they're using it to help with Kyndra to help their scientists really find information faster. Let's see here. I talked a little bit about Amazon Connect. I'm kind of coming up to the end here of the deck. The one thing I do want to talk about, though, it was mentioned, I think Matt mentioned HealthLake, and I talked a little bit about it. So Redox has been a fantastic partner of AWS. They were one of the launch partners that helped build a dedicated connector to get data from different data sets and load it to HealthLake. And in this, so like with HealthLake, by getting your data there, we're seeing customers start to use it a variety of ways. I'm working with like a large medical device manufacturer right now, building like a clinical trials platform on HealthLake. There's in this example here, we have Rush Medical. They've been doing a lot of their COVID-19 research and tracking their patients using Amazon HealthLake. And HealthLake is, like I said, it came out in July of this year, so it's new, and we're continuing to build on it. We do have reInvent coming up in 2 weeks that I'll be at, where it's in Vegas, where a lot of our customers come and learn about new launch announcements that AWS will be revealing. And so, keep your eyes out for new announcements around like HealthLake and a lot of our other healthcare AI services, because this is something Amazon is going to continue to invest in for years to come. And so to kind of wrap it up, when it comes to innovation, like Matt one talked about at the top, it's having that place where you can, we have a partner like Redox to help you get your data into this place to go build and innovate. This isn't new. I mean, this is being done today. And that's what's really exciting about being a solutions architect for healthcare here at AWS is helping customers, build those new experiences and really think about kind of the art of the possible. And at AWS, we work with partners like Prime TSR, like Redox, to then, once you have that environment stood up and data flowing in, to now start thinking about what other things can I do with that? What are those new experiences I want to build for my patients or for my clinicians or for our employees? And so this was my last slide, Matt, number one. And so I'm going to stop. Happy to answer any questions anyone might have, or we can wait till the end.
Let's see. Okay, are we on time?
Brian,
Awesome. Thank you for that. I'm gonna fly. Yeah, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna fly through the last bit of content, and then we do have some questions. I noticed that looks like Alan posted some questions that I'd like to get to. But Brian, awesome stuff. And appreciate the perspective that you're giving us. Let me wind this down then. Let's kind of talk about that then. Exactly what Brian just said. Like, we're in this great place. How do we innovate then? And I loved Legos as a kid. I still love them. And I really think about that ecosystem within AWS as being a rich collection of very sometimes standard, but also very unique at times Lego blocks that we can stack together and build something. And that's what we've been doing at Prime TSR. So first thing, just a little bit about who we are. I look at this as the brass tacks, or kind of the essentials of innovating and helping our clients thrive and grow in the cloud. I mentioned this slide not just like it's specific to us. I think this is I also think this is in general some important things. On the left-hand column, you see the values. The way we operate and the way we've had a lot of success operating in this space is first and foremost having a bias for action. It's almost like a sense of urgency, and we try to avoid lengthy analysis paralysis. It's about getting things out the door and learning from it. Working together is also important. Having it be a partnership with all constituents, with all everybody that's a participant. And most importantly, to be able to show progress as we're moving through things. That's also key in this dynamic. And then last but not least, delivering excellence. And to me, what that's all about is defining what that means and making sure we measure it as we go forward. And I think if we're doing all of these things, I think that's really kind of the key mindset to have in the journey that we're taking on. For us, our partnership with AWS means a lot too. And what it means in particular is the proximity and access that we get to the expertise and to the knowledge that AWS has. And so all of these accolades and certifications and competencies, they mean a lot to us, predominantly because that's how we're able to get close and partner with AWS. The last thing I'll mention on this slide, we are Prime TSR. We're going after that bottom right-hand corner, that healthcare competency. Gosh, I hope we're waiting for the thumbs up. We've submitted. We're anxious and excited to hear about that. But again, like I call this out more so from the perspective of I love the fact that AWS is supporting a healthcare competency, and the fact that vendors like us can get into it and again get close and be there kind of at the ground floor with AWS on what's going on. It's kind of sappy when I look at it, but really it's about our people. It's really about having great people, and I'm proud of what we've been able to do, and I think all of this is what enables us to help our customers. Let's talk. I'm going to talk quickly about some innovations that we've seen, some things that we've done, some stories, and they're all kind of organized in this manner. This is how we think about our services. It's about enablement, which is getting people into the cloud. It is operating and governing what's out there for them. Data and analytics. It's about structuring your data, what we've all been talking about, and being able to get insights out of that data. And then last, definitely not least, probably the most important of all of this is then the development side, and that's where we're actually building products that have impact. And honestly, it's rare that we only operate in one of these pillars. The engagements that we're doing and the innovations that we're seeing, they're typically happening with combinations of these pillars. The first one I want to talk about, it's actually not a healthcare example, but it's closely related, and I think the challenge here was very common. This touches on our data and analytics space, and I think there's also a sprinkle of rapid product innovation from a service perspective. The idea here, though, the challenge that farmers had, they had a lot of different. First off, they have millions of customers. They have tens of thousands of agents and millions of customers, and lots of different policies that they operated across. And each of these policies had their own kind of solutions and systems. The problem statement was they didn't have a single cohesive concept of a customer. A customer's identity was different within each system. And so you can imagine, and maybe some of you see this today, there's a lot of what we call swivel chair operations. So agents were literally logging in and logging out of different systems, as were the customers. And so the solution here, what we were brought in to do was really, it was about architecting a solution to centralize and take historic data and amalgamate that into a single concept and something easily accessible for customers to represent that customer, their identity. Unifying all of these systems and unifying the experience for the individuals. What we did here is a lot of this was about data architecting. AWS, in this example, AWS provided us with the plumbing to centralize and convert all this data. Brian mentioned data lakes earlier. This is a use case where we use data lakes. And so all of that customer information came together within data lakes. We used that to create that single identity, which really that's the innovation here. What was done, the thing that was done differently here for farmers was creating that unified identity and integrating it across all the different systems. And the impact here is pretty large. So it's kind of a small baby step, nothing fancy, but the impact was tremendous. Elimination of duplicated efforts across the different groups. All that information could be used to like pre-populate different areas of the system because we knew who we were talking about. A lot of happy customers as well. Previously, customers were logging into different systems, so you can imagine that's a little bit of a problem. And so again, to me, the innovation here, real simple, but tremendous impact for them. The next example I want to talk about is Vine. So Vine is directly from the healthcare world. The setting here, Vine Medical, they provide a centralized healthcare specific platform. And what it does is it does all kinds of things, captures, automates, manages, and exchanges interactions with patients, payers, and providers. That's a mouthful. But that's kind of their mission statement and how they define themselves. They identified a need in the market that they wanted to fill, a gap that they wanted to pounce on. And it was related to digitizing a manual process around Medicare audits. And so the idea here was speed to market. They had to get something in place and they wanted to get something out the door quickly. They also wanted it to be centralized. They were into the SaaS kind of software as a service platform idea to simplify the onboarding and the overhead that customers would have. So this was a way to very quickly get people onto their new offering, their new platform. And so the idea here, this comes into the rapid product innovation space. The idea here is leveraging the agility and speed that we get from the Lego blocks, from taking pre-built components from AWS and putting them together, allowing us then to focus on the important areas of the system. We didn't have to waste time thinking about we didn't have to waste time thinking about reinventing the wheel. We were able to latch on to very specific functionality from AWS with the added bonus of it being, compliant and certified, within the regulatory space, especially within the healthcare world. So all a lot of the things that Brian mentioned, that's where those came into play here. So we had some core services. I'll give you some examples. We leveraged AWS for secure file storage. And so a lot of documents were being exchanged, and we were able to put those into file storage within AWS that met all of the regulatory requirements. Same thing with identity. We were able to leverage AWS's identity services that allowed us to have a secure system as well as a compliance system. Last but not least, we used a lot of serverless functions as well, lambdas in AWS parlance. And those lambdas were really what allowed us to be nimble, be quick. It simplified the way we went about making changes while we were building this application. Last but not least, the other thing that we leveraged within AWS that I think is sometimes underrated or not thought about is all of the proven practices around software development, the continuous integration, the CI/CD, all of the pipelines for getting our code automated and safely deployed. That was also something that we were able to leverage. And so the punchline on this one, the innovation is really, it's amazing. We were able to get a product live in 16 weeks. And so we went from start to finish 16 weeks into production with actually customers leveraging the system. And again, I think the key here, we didn't focus on mundane functionality. We spent our time on the hard stuff. Speed to market, that's the key with that, I think, with that study. The last one here then that I'm going to talk about, this is in the EHR space, specifically in the behavioral health. We had a customer that this was super important time, right? During the quarantine, I think the behavioral health industry was really, spiking and needing to be providing top-notch service. And so where we came in this instance was the client needed help with some very specific functionality within their existing application. What was unique about this setting is that the client was not in the cloud. And so I like this story because here's an example where they wanted to build something new. It was related to their SureScripts interface. They were integrating with SureScripts, and it was very the interaction was tricky because we were waiting for it's sometimes a lengthy exchange of information between their application and SureScripts. They were an on-prem application. What we did was we came in and said, hey, let's start to move some of this functionality out into the cloud. Let's get you out there, get you started, and at the same time, we'll leverage some of the AWS services. In this case, we leveraged the simple queuing service to streamline and make that communication with SureScripts much more seamless, much more resilient for their application. And I think the punchline here is, don't be afraid to blaze a trail. Don't be afraid to get out into the cloud and start to learn. In this case of this client, this is where their people started to get experience actually using and operating applications within the cloud, which I think is important. Last slide, and we're done. We're pretty much out of time here. I appreciate everybody's time. To me, when I look across those case studies, there's really three themes that I want to leave you with. And really, I think all of us are talking about these things. I don't think this is unique to just my section. Number one, leverage the ecosystem. Brian said it, Matt said it with regards to how their network, the Redox network is out there. Leverage the ecosystem and take advantage of what's out there. Those Lego blocks are tremendous. And in a lot of cases, they're secure and certified. But, number two is kind of related to that. Focus on the hard stuff. Again, don't worry about the mundane or the problems that are already solved. Use your energy to focus on the bigger challenges. And then last but not least, start small. Don't be paralyzed by grand plans to get out into the cloud. You can be pragmatic, carve out areas of functionality and get them out there. And lastly, innovate. Again, it's about doing things differently. That's what's key in all of this. We're out of time. I apologize, we don't have time for live questions. I did see some in the question box here, so we'll get back to you on some of those. But in closing, really appreciate everybody's time, especially the attendees, but also the presenters. We're all looking forward to seeing many more advances and many more innovations in the industry. And if you have more questions, if you know, definitely if there's other things that you want to talk about, you know who we are. Please feel free to reach out. Feel free to contact us. You can respond to the meeting invites, or you can just look for us on LinkedIn. I think we'd all be happy to talk to you if you've got other topics you want to talk about. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it, and everybody have a great rest of your day.